We're doing retail updates for 2025. We're the Supplier Wiki team. This is Allie. I'm Peter. We're on one of us is on basically every one of these webinars now. So you might get tired of hearing from us as we go, but this is us. Today, our agenda is a little bit of news. So kind of what's happening in the industry. And we'll do a little engaging trivia as well to get everyone off their seats and thinking. And then we're going to go kind of by retailer. What are some of the important changes and updates that suppliers should know for each of these? Walmart, Target, and then we'll do Amazon, Home Depot, and Kroger as well in kind of one big section because the updates aren't as widespread there. And we'll do a Q&A at the end too. So get those questions in early too. Speaking of, how do you do that? Well, you can use the chat for more like public discourse, but our Q&A tab is for the more formal questions that you have for us regarding these updates. Oftentimes, if we don't have the answer to these, we can pass them on to someone else at the org who is more of a subject matter expert in that particular retailer or that particular compliance program or whatever it is. So if we don't have the answers for you, we do know someone who does, or we know how close we can get to an answer for some of those too. So that's one of the wonderful things about Supplier Wiki. And then another question that we get pretty commonly is, will you be getting a copy of the slide deck? Yes, you will. So there's no need to take super vigorous notes. We'll be sending out a copy of the slide deck as well as a recording of this webinar in the next 3 to 4 business days. We also have all of our slide decks and all of our recordings on our domain at supplierwiki.supplypike.com. You can see all of those under the on-demand section. And so you can download the slide decks and you can view the old webinars as well. So let that be a helpful resource for you as well. So talked a little bit about Supplier Wiki, but Supply Pike is our, parent organization. Excuse me. I could feel that coming from like 3 slides before. At Supply Pike, basically what we're doing is we're using automation software to help make the dispute process go really smoothly. So we partner with, or we aggregate all of the shipping documents that are relevant to certain kinds of revenue loss in order to do validity checks on those and then automate the dispute process so that you guys can save time working on growing your business instead of trying to deal with all of that. So that's really how we got started. We like to summarize what we do as helping suppliers to get paid and then get better as well, with visibility into compliance performance and supplier performance sort of generally. So we're in a bunch of different categories and we work with a wide variety of suppliers. And it's one of the coolest things about our job is that we really get to hear from the really big players in the retail space, the really big suppliers, as well as some of the smaller ones who are going to be only in 1 or 2 stores or 1 or 2 DCs. So we get to interact with a lot of different kinds of suppliers, and that helps us on the Supplier Wiki side create educational content that is that can kind of span that whole range. So that's another kind of cool thing that we do there too. So Supplier Wiki, we are a team on this in Supply Pike, and our goal is to basically help create as much educational content as possible for suppliers to help them with whatever it is. So not just revenue loss, but maybe it's shipping and routing, as you can see there, or we've been talking a ton about Luminate right now, soon to be Scintilla with that rebranding. But yeah, whatever the issue is, whatever the hazy fog of confusion is, whether that's a compliance program or some new initiative of a retailer's or whatever, we want to cover it and we want to help y'all understand as much of it as possible, help summarize long, confusing documents, but also just kind of connect suppliers with each other to be able to share insights as well. So that's what our content really is that's the main goal of it. So of course, as I always like to say, if there's any questions or recommendations that you have, anything that you're finding particularly confusing right now, You could put it in the Q&A. You could DM us. You can send it to our emails as well at the end. We just love to hear from you guys about what are the things that are really tripping you up right now, or that you would like to learn more about, whether that's in the form of a webinar or an article or something like that as well. So that's that. That's some of our resources. Now we're going to get into a trivia question.
All right. Peter's going to launch our trivia question that should show up on your screen and you can participate. I also don't know the answer to this. Which global retailer pioneered the cross-docking approach to make its supply chain more efficient? I feel like I'm going to answer this wrong. I think it's Walmart, but for some reason, Peter, IKEA is speaking to me.
IKEA.
Like, that's a really great, we didn't write this question. Someone else on our team did. So we're answering it in real time. I could see them being really great at that too. They're just so efficient. If you go into an IKEA, it's like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Walmart.
It's a maze. It's a trap. That's what I'm sorry. I shouldn't. That's
it is effective retail. That's what we'll say.
My vote is for Amazon. We only have one vote for Amazon so far. I think I'll close this out pretty soon. So get your votes in if you haven't already. Angela said in the chat, Walmart seems pretty confident. We've got 10 voters. 8 of them have selected Walmart. 80% of our voters have said Walmart. And then we have 1 vote for Amazon, 1 vote for Costco. I'm going to end it right now. Share the results. And we don't know what the correct answer is, unless you know. It's probably Walmart. That's the Democratic vote. That's the people's choice, is Walmart. Do we have a slide with the answer in it?
We don't. I can always check the notes. I'm pretty sure it's Walmart. Peter, you go verify that we have the answer. I think it's in the slide deck notes, but we'll just keep going on and then you let us know if we're right. I think Walmart's right. So awesome. We're going to go ahead and get started today. Like Peter said, we're covering a lot of recap that happened in 2024 across retailers. There was a lot that went on. Primarily, we're going to focus on Walmart and Target because there were more changes in those retailers. However, we will cover some of the changes in Target, in Home Depot, Kroger, and I think we've got one more in there. Let me go back just to make sure I know. Yeah, Amazon, Home Depot, Kroger. I keep forgetting Amazon. What's going on? And Peter said the answer is Walmart. So congrats to everyone who said that. And no one voted for IKEA. So it definitely was a good trick one. Okay, we're going to start with just some news, what's happened in the last couple of days. This type of webinar that we're doing is modeled off of our Vendorville newsletter. If you're not a part of that, I highly suggest going and signing up. Peter can send a link to signing up if you're not a part of that. What we've been doing is sharing retail news that we see, and then we'll typically dive into a topic that is pertinent to retailers, and I'll cover some of those. We have web pages of all of the Vendorville content that we publish, but if you want to get first to the source of some of that content, signing up for the newsletter is the best way to do that. So you might see some of these headlines in that newsletter coming up this week or from past newsletters. So big thing, Walmart has completed the acquisition of Vizio. So Vizio owns TVs, primarily is what you may have seen, but they also own a lot of other things. Namely, they refer to it as customer entertainment experiences. So this is going to be plugging into Walmart Connect, which is the advertising business at Walmart. So I'm interested to see, as well as I'm sure some of you else are, is understanding how this partnership is going to flourish and what that's going to mean for those who are using Walmart Connect. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Makes sense. Best Buy is launching scheduled parcel delivery. So that's, again, something that is going to be more of that last mile that's been very key for retailers like Walmart, Target, etc. So there's going to be more of that coming in Best Buy, so it makes sense for them. And then last headline we wanted to call out that's come up in the last couple of days is Walmart is closing their New Jersey Sam's Club fulfillment center, and that is going to be relocated to other facilities within the retail fulfillment network. Namely, there is a new age DC that is coming up in Pennsylvania. If you want to read those articles, Peter can send those links in the chat. But that should be interesting to see how Walmart has continued to invest a lot of their dollars and a lot of their tech into fulfillment centers. That's been something they've been talking about for years. So this is continuing to unfold. All right. We're going to get into changes for Walmart suppliers. This is probably going to be our media section, and fair warning to Peter and everyone else, I'm going to be sending a lot of resources because Supplier Wiki already recapped a lot of this information. Really, we want to cover it now for you guys so you're able to see what you missed, send these resources to your colleagues who this may affect them in 2025 or even today, and then just kind of do that roundup of all the things that have gone on. All right, here's just the too long didn't read summary of the major changes that happened at Walmart. The OTIF program had an update, so there was actually a reduction in the goal amounts, and we'll get into those numbers specifically here in a second. SQEP program continued. We saw some effects with the changes to ASNs, which increased ASN fines on the SQEP side, but phase 4 is still pending. So that scheduling and transportation has not rolled out. And I don't know, we've been tracking SQEP for a while. That's in 2022 or 2021 when it launched. And SQEP still has not launched phase 4. So that's still kind of pending, but the other phases are continuing to be iterated on. The collect pickup program changed to the fuel management program, and it was actually a reduction in the fees that are collected from suppliers, which is great, but we'll talk about what that means. And then settlement disputing went away in, I believe, 2023. There were some suppliers still getting settlement disputes in 2024. It's really on a case-by-case basis, but this year was the year of suppliers learning how to use the mass dispute creation tool and learning how to dispute manually in APDP, Walmart's disputing portal for AP deductions. And then the other big update, probably the one that is still affecting suppliers the most, is DSS is sunsetted. It is gone. I don't believe there's any reports that have functionality anymore. So I don't think that anyone can use DSS. And now it is all transferred to Luminate Basic, which is the free version, or Charter. And Luminate is getting a name change, and it is being called Scintilla. We just did a webinar on this, so you can go and look at the slide deck and get signed up for the recording. So Peter will send that link if you want to see the updates that happened in Scintilla. There's not a ton yet, but we are anticipating in 2025 with the name change, the rebrand, there will probably be some updates. So stay tuned for that. We'll be keeping you guys updated too. And then Supplier One. Supplier One is a new platform. It launched and it canceled out some of the functionality on Item 360 and has transferred in some of the other applications. So we'll get into that in detail as well. But really a lot for suppliers to keep up with your day-to-day. So pat yourselves on the back because you've really been through the ringer. These are a lot of challenges or things you have to pivot around. So great job, guys. If no one's telling you, I'm going to tell you. All right, let's get into the compliance updates. We started talking about OTIF compliance updates, but what actually happened? So this is just a timeline of what's happened in the last couple of years. I do feel like in the retail world, especially as a supplier and especially as a Walmart supplier, it's good to have this context because there has been a lot of changes in the last couple of years. If you are a new supplier, it may feel like it's just always changing, and that might be the case because it's been updating for a while. We're going to go back to 2017 when OTIF launched. That program has kind of continued to build out, and the goals haven't changed that much, but they did this year, so we'll talk through that. And then SQEP, which is essentially like a sister program to OTIF, launched and is continuing its release. So they're making updates, they're tweaking how they're tracking things as their DCs are updating and rolling out those phases as needed since 2021. So like I mentioned, OTIF, the OTIF program, which stands for On Time and In Full, that compliance program updated February 1st of 2024. I know it does not feel like it's almost been a year ago, but it has. And Walmart actually relaxed their OTIF goals. They brought down that 98% to about 95% for the total goal, which is surprising for Walmart. They typically have high expectations, so they relaxed that. And then they moved the charging from monthly to quarterly. So it's actually a little bit more manageable for suppliers to then go in, understand their disputes, and then either dispute them or accept those fines from the compliance issues. All right. These are the new on-time OTIF goals, and I'm really going to just break down the simple, high-level OTIF, what that means. But we do have content on OTIF at Walmart. We've got articles, ebooks, webinars, so you can go and explore that. Peter will send some of our more recent ones that explain that if you are completely new in that program is something that you're not aware of and want to learn more about. So we'll start with on time. So that is the first part of that acronym. And what does that mean? Well, when you're delivering with any supplier, especially Walmart, you need to have your delivery there just in time. You can't send it too early because there may not be space in the DC for you, and it may not be slotted because everything is working very succinctly. And you obviously can't send it late because there's an expectation. There are trucks coming in to then cross dock and take them to stores. Whatever the situation is, there's a lot of moving parts, and early and late deliveries are going to lead to congestion, and then it's going to lead to compliance issues on your side as a supplier and getting compliance fines. So what are the expectations? Walmart expects for you to deliver to DCs on time if you're prepaid. So prepaid versus collect being Walmart freight or someone is representing Walmart. There you are getting all of your stuff ready to be picked up. When it comes to prepaid, you are asking a 3PL, or maybe you have your own logistics or freight vertical within your business. You need to be delivering to DCs on time. So even if someone, let's say CH Robinson, is representing you for prepaid, if they're not getting to the DC on time, it's still your responsibility to work with them and to own that fine. So the goal is to 90% of the time be on time to delivery. So that has actually lowered. I believe it was 95 in the past, and that's lowered to 90. And then for our collect POs, so that means that Walmart Freight or someone else is representing Walmart on behalf of their freight business, is making sure the supplier has routed or confirmed the POs on time and ensuring that the POs are ready for carrier pickup. So it's kind of like if you ever rode the bus at school, if you didn't have your backpack and you weren't ready to step on that bus and you weren't waiting at the stop sign for the bus driver, you were not on time. You were not ready to be collected and taken to school. It's the same for our PO, our collect POs. So that is staying at 98. And that makes sense because typically that means you have less responsibility in getting there. There's a couple less steps when it comes to delivering that on time versus prepaid. So still higher. And that's something that you can collaborate with Walmart. If it's their responsibility, it wouldn't impact you in a compliance fine. All right, spent a lot of time on the on time part. In full is really simple. Essentially, Walmart expects to receive 100% of all their ordered cases, but of course, this is the real world and this is the supply chain world. So we understand that mistakes happen, there are issues, and the current goal is 95%, and that's what's been changed. So what is Walmart's expectation when it comes to in full? They expect suppliers to fill orders to the exact quantity ordered 95% of the time. There are issues where you may get a compliance fine and it's actually not your fault as a supplier. It would be an invalid charge. You can dispute that. We'll talk about that a little bit as well, but you can see that in some of our other content. You can also see with compliance charges that this might bleed into some other programs, like getting a deduction for a shortage. When you walk through the expectation of filling orders to the exact quantity ordered, there's a couple ways you can mess that up, whether it's Walmart's responsibility to address the issue or the suppliers. That could be you're not filling any of the orders, you've only filled some of the orders, it's a shortage, or you've overfilled, that would be an overage. So you can see how this bleeds into AP deductions. All right, and then here's a quick overview of OTIF tools. There's two different places for you to start working on your OTIF compliance issues. First is in Retail Link. You go to the OTIF dashboard. It's been around, I believe, since 2017, and they've continued to work on that OTIF dashboard. So it's got a lot of metrics in there. It's visibility to your OTIF data. I believe it's still on 13 weeks, so it can't go back completely. But essentially, you just work through that data on the OTIF scorecard and use that when looking at your OTIF fines. And then if you're going to actually dispute an OTIF fine, you log into HighRadius. It's a separate login. We can send you that information if you don't have that. But it's HighRadius representing Walmart as a dispute portal for both OTIF fines and SQEP fines. So you can do those in the same place. You cannot dispute AP deductions in HighRadius. That is an APDP, which we'll talk about here in a second. All right, like I said, we're going to talk about deductions and fees. So before we talked about compliance fines, those are fines that you can dispute. You can say, hey, these are invalid. I want to actually not pay for these. They're typically not auto-deducted, so you're saying ahead of time, hey, please don't charge me for these. Or if they are auto-deducted, you're going back and saying, hey, please repay that amount of money to me because this charge was actually invalid. When it comes to deductions and fees, we've paired these together because they feel like you can dispute both of them, but you actually can't. You can dispute deductions. However, you can't dispute fees. So this is Walmart's specific language. If you hear deductions, fines, chargebacks, you can dispute those. Fees are something that is not disputable, and there's not an actual particular portal for those charges. So we'll get into what that looks like. We're going to start with the fuel management program, and I want you to keep that word fee in mind. The fuel management program allots fees, so these are non-disputable. And this is for collect suppliers who use Walmart Freight in the US. And if you're familiar with the collect pickup program, it is essentially feels very similar to that particular program. So we'll kind of get into the timeline here. So if you were with us back in 2022, we were talking about the collect pickup program. That was something that was rolled out just before 4th of July. Essentially, it was saying, hey, suppliers, because of fuel costs and because of some of the other things that we're seeing in the transportation industry, we're going to be charging these. You need to share, the EDLP cost for customers, and this is a part of that. And that went into effect August 1st, 2022 for all collect suppliers. And there were some issues with fees and the fees charged. There were some errors, and it was two parts. There was a percentage for your department, and then there was an amount for the amount of fuel that you were using, essentially. That's now changed. So in February 2024, the collect pickup program was replaced by the fuel management program. And essentially they got rid of the percentage for department. So that's no longer being charged. I haven't seen any reason why they changed that, and I don't think they spoke to it. I know there were a lot of issues with how that was actually rolling out and being charged to suppliers. It was also changing on a monthly basis, so it didn't seem like a attainable thing to ask suppliers to, hey, you're going to get this percentage that we're going to take from your cost of goods each month. Figure it out. That's really hard when you're planning with the razor thin margins that suppliers know that they're working with. So the fuel management program is what has replaced that. Couple things to take away. Why is this something that Walmart's doing? It's the same as the collect pickup program. And actually we do have articles on this showing in detail what's the same and what's changed. And Peter can send that. I'm making him work in the background. So it's essentially just the extra costs to offset suppliers that should be taken into account with the transportation industry. And then talking through collect versus prepaid, we have this conversation a lot with suppliers. Typically, you get to a point where you're doing a mix of both. There are some suppliers who are all in and collect. Some are doing all prepaid. They all have different benefits. There's not a wrong answer, but there are benefits and drawbacks that are going to be pertinent to the type of business you have, the type of product you have, the type of budget and cash flow. There's lots of factors to consider. So this is a great place to start with a fuel management program and say, hey, we're going to get these fees no matter what. Are we baking this into our cost? Does it make sense to say collect? Would it be better to work prepaid? What's the cost to working prepaid and shipping that into Walmart that way? Really just an analysis. So consider this when you're thinking about if you're changing how you're going to be doing transportation. All right, now we're transitioning into deductions. So reminder, we're talking about fees. Those are really not disputable unless there's just an obvious glaring issue and there's not a dispute process for that. So it's going to be by email. When it comes to disputing your AP deductions, a huge change happened. Settlement disputing, which was essentially Walmart reaching out and saying, hey, you have this bucket of deductions. We're going to say that 40% of these are valid and we're going to take this chunk of change for what that is. And 60% of those are invalid. And we're going to pay that back to you or not charge you for it, depending on where your deductions were. That's no longer a practice of Walmart's that is mainstream. They have this year done that kind of on a case-by-case basis to catch up with the amount of deductions claims that they were working with. So we have talked to some suppliers who had settlements with Walmart, even in this last quarter. So it's still something that's going on, but it is a Walmart initiated initiative. It's not something that's initiated by suppliers, and they are directing suppliers to use APDP. So what is that? The Accounts Payable Dispute Portal is a application within Retail Link, and they have a feature called Mass Dispute Creation. And essentially what you do is you click a bunch of the deductions that you want to dispute, and you hit send, and you can send about 500 at a time. At this time, you can attach proof documentation to all those claims. So it is a little bit more like throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks. And then there are deductions that may get denied that you would want to go back and manually dispute individually. So we recommend suppliers try, if you're not a customer of ours, you can kind of forego this. But if you're wanting to do this manually, you can try mass dispute creation and then go back and dispute manually the rest of them that come back as denied. Because you can actually dispute with Walmart, I think up to 3 times is the number that we see. There's not like a hard and fast rule, but when we work with suppliers, you can typically dispute about up to 3 times. And you'll get a lot more bang for your buck if you're doing it that way. All right, so just to show you some of the changes that have happened to APDP, it launched in 2021, which feels like so long ago, but it's really not. It replaced direct commerce. So if you see that name thrown around, that used to be the platform that they were disputing on. There's no more historical data that needs to be pulled from that typically. And that's just to have a better disputing process. Then in October 2022, the announcement of settlement disputing was ended. They started phasing that out. The phasing out process has gone longer than 6 months, but this is kind of the official timeline from Walmart. And then all suppliers have moved to disputing individually. And there are still suppliers that are working on understanding how to individually dispute and finding best practice for that outside of settlement. All right, just a couple more things on mass dispute creation. It sounds like a like for like, but again, it's not. It's more individual disputing. So finding ways for your team to dispute faster and more efficiently is key. If that's with SupplyPike, we can send a link so you can see what that looks like disputing with Walmart. Peter will send you to our product page. But we're going to keep focusing on changes for Walmart suppliers because I feel like the biggest changes this year have been in apps and platforms. There's been a lot of investment from Walmart on their tech and what they're doing within their apps and platforms for suppliers. And that has really changed a lot of the ways that all of y'all work. And I've heard it from suppliers. I've seen it in some of the conversations, the frustration, and the curiosity that it's taken this year to adapt to those. We're going to start with Supplier One. Like I said in the beginning, Supplier One essentially rolled out as a platform that didn't have a lot of application in it. First, it was just items in inventory, which is essentially the duplicate functionality of item 360. Now, item 360 is being sunsetted, and that is not the application that you're supposed to be setting up items in or doing maintenance in. And that was really the first application within Supplier One. And when you look at this picture here, this is actually from Supplier One, their side tab. It was just items in inventory and then reports, performance, and forecasts. They've added here, so I'll walk through this. And I would recommend, if you haven't touched Supplier One because you thought, oh, this is just item management and I don't have to work in that, there's somebody else on my team, go in and look at it. It's definitely worth taking a look. I think this is my tinfoil hat, so don't take this as the end all be all. But I imagine that we'll see more investment in this and possibly more applications in Retail Link moved over to to Supplier One. So order management has similar functionality to Nova. It's not a like for like. Nova still is the application you should be using for order management, but we're going to be keeping an eye on if that's changing and if we see Nova going away. But you can look up POs and kind of understand that you just can't execute changes in order management. Then ship point management, if we're scrolling down, that is new. That's been added in this quarter. It's essentially Aspen. So I don't know the rollout or the sunsetting for Aspen, but that's what it's been compared to. So if someone wants to drop that, I think we have an article on it. I know we wrote a newsletter on it, and that is on Supplier Wiki. So you can go and look at the details for that. And then payments, that's going to have some pretty basic visibility on deductions data and info. It is a helpful starting place, but again, you can't dispute. Maybe a tab that you want to have open though when you're doing proof documentation in APDP. So that's a good consideration. And the reports, it's just a ton of different reports that suppliers have used. You may want to go look at this if you have been struggling with DSS being gone and Luminate being your one reporting application. There is some stuff in here that may be helpful and maybe a like for like. So I'd recommend that. And then performance, this actually links to a lot of the scorecards that are already in Retail Link, like OTIF scorecard, SWEP scorecard, the ASN scorecard. So it's all in one place. And when you click on some of that data, it actually takes you to those scorecard pages. So it's just another quick links that you can use. And those scorecards are aggregated in one place, which is nice. And then demand and forecasts, daily demand, inventory record. So again, really helpful stuff. Really quick to, just look at and be able to use. So curious if anyone's in the chat, if you've used it or have a helpful feature, please mention it so some other suppliers can learn from you. Okay, we all know about this. If you don't, where have you been? Walmart replaced DSS with Luminate in 2024. This rollout time changed several times. It was supposed to be Q1, then it became Q2, and then they slowly discontinued some of the applications or the reports you could pull in DSS. So this has been a slow burn, but it's kind of like a breakup a little bit where we're losing DSS. And if you've been a supplier for many years, it truly is a breakup. DSS has been around since 1997. So yeah, it will be missed. And in some ways it won't. But suppliers essentially have two options with Luminate. You can go use the basic, so the required unpaid service, and then Charter, which is the optional paid service. And if you haven't seen what those look like, we have webinars on them. Peter actually just did one last week, I believe. So that recording will be up here in a couple of days. So you can go sign up for the webinar still, and you'll actually get that recording sent to you. So Supplier Wiki tip. I'm going to skip the question for the chat, but if you feel like you want to share, if you've started using Luminate and if there's something helpful, please share that about Luminate or Supplier One. I'd love to hear that. So what was lost? Some of you already know what was lost and you can feel that. But essentially some of the flexibility of report building in DSS wasn't translated to Luminate Basic. So like I said, there's been a big adjustment for suppliers who have used DSS in the past, had beautiful reports built out that they knew how to pull, and now they're pulling them in Luminate. Another thing I want to call out that we have heard the Luminate team say is don't compare old reports from DSS to Luminate. The way that they're pulling in data is different. So spend your time digging into how is Luminate pulling this number and understanding that, because what you'll end up doing is comparing apples to oranges if you're looking at a number from DSS and a number from Luminate that should line up. Not in every case should they line up. So go and explore that depending on what report you're building. And then what was gained from the transition from DSS to Luminate? So there's more performance visibility, especially focused on omnichannel and .com. I know it was really hard to pull in DSS some of that information and to parse that out. So suppliers have a better insight into shopper behavior, especially if you're looking at Charter. There's a lot more information on the customer when it comes to baskets, assortment choices, categories, and you can actually poll customers. I haven't worked with any suppliers who have used that, so I'm interested to know how that works. Again, that's a part of Charter. So you can build out insights that way. And like what was mentioned, go check out our content where we've compared what's basic versus Charter if you're interested in that. And the biggest update that we have so far is Luminate's name is changing. So on October 1st, the data ventures team, which is in charge of Luminate, Connect, etc., announced Luminate will start to be called Scintilla, which I believe is Latin for like a small flame. If I read that correctly, someone can correct me if I'm wrong. And that's expected to begin in 2025. So if you log into Luminate and it's called Scintilla, you're still in the right place. And again, here's my tinfoil hat. Here's what I'm thinking as I look at this. And I wonder if anyone else is thinking the same. When there's a name change or a rebrand, I assume there's going to be changes and updates. And this is the beginning of their roadmap for this product. So I'm interested to see what those changes will look like. And of course, if you're subscribed to the newsletter and you're coming to these webinars, we're going to keep you updated and pull out the information suppliers care about as we see those changes coming. All right. So much time on Walmart. I'm going to kind of breeze through Target because really I want to just make y'all aware of what those changes are. And then we'll get into some of the other retailers. All right. So essentially, there was a lot of changes to OTIF programs, Walmart being one and Target being the other. They also dropped their on-time and fill rate fines from 5% to 3% of cost of goods sold. And there's a lot of changes to this program. We actually worked on some content that we got to talk to the actual team in charge of the compliance program. And this is something that they talked about having, a focus on making suppliers' lives easier. And so I highly recommend if you have anybody on your team who is doing Target, working on Target compliance, to go review the deck that we built out covering all of these in detail. So I'm going to cover them really fast. Fill rates now assessed at item level rather than PO level, which can affect, how you're actually getting those fines and the visibility you have. Fine rates are going to be given based on fill rate original as to the revised amount. So this is actually a return from pre-COVID. So it's kind of undoing some of the strict standards that were established during COVID and how that affected supply chain. Prepaid suppliers window moved from 2 days early to 1 day before or after, so an update to MABD. And then collect suppliers have new on-time release and supplier pickup adherence. And a lot of this rolled out in Q3, so I'm switching over to the updates and announcements timeline, and it's going into effect either Q3 or Q4. So this is going to be an adjustment that you're having this trial period now. And in 2025, there will be more adjustment that's coming from these changes. Like I said, the fines actually dropped from 5% to 3%, and the fill rates remain the same, but 100% on time is a little bit higher than Walmart's, and then the fill rate is actually, I believe, on par with Walmart's now. So interesting to compare the two. And then I talked about instead of PO level, fill rate is going to be at item level. This is actually I think, helpful to suppliers in understanding what is happening with their supply chain, what's happening with their items. And then you're doing less analysis on the supplier's end of digging into that PO and what happened with it. Fill rate revised to fill rate original. Again, if you were a target supplier pre-COVID, this will feel like a return to normalcy. So that's something that they wanted to update. And those revisions will continue to be made and monitored in ShipIQ. And then the on-time arrival window, that's a prepaid standard. It's continuing to be just that shorter window. So the one day before, day after, or day of, or day after. So it's a little less flexible, but again, that's what it has been in the past. And then new collect fines. So there's the on-time release and then the supplier pickup adherence. And that began in August 4th, 2024, and is tracked in ShipIQ. So if that's something that you've seen in your team, you're like, I didn't know what those were. We should probably look at those. We're going to break them down here for you now. So essentially the on-time release is if you're releasing that PO, we'll just use that, even though it's at item level, it's less than 100%, you're going to be fined 1.5 cost of goods on the units released late and missing. And for SPA, the supplier pickup and adherence, if it's less than 100%, it's again that 1.5 cost of goods for those PO locations. And then the threshold is a $50 minimum. So even if you have products that are, that 1.5 cost of goods sold is less than that, it's going to be at that $50. What does this mean? Again, I'll go through this really fast. We kind of covered this in the Walmart OTIF compliance, but essentially if your inventory is not ready to be picked up, you're going to get a fine. If you haven't established that pickup appointment that's available, or it's the shipping location is closed and you didn't, let your target freight team know, then that's going to be another compliance fine. And then target adjusted quantity. That's essentially defined as when the inventory analyst has added quantities late to the PO, and then the vendor is no longer able to have that product ready. So when you're adjusting the quantity and you can't fulfill it, you're going to have a compliance fine for that. And then I already mentioned this initiative intention. The SPM team at Walmart wants to keep fines down without lowering their standards, but also making it easier for suppliers to connect the dots when it comes to their supply chain performance, help target, have that replenishment optimization and sales optimization, and keeping that relationship positive without jeopardizing the relationship Target has with its customers. So keep looking out for that. And the update, or rather the timeline, is for 2024 to onboard everyone. So 2025, everyone is locked in and understands these. So you still have November and December, or December, to continue to update this, work on this program, and make sure that you are adhering to these new standards. All right, we've got a couple more minutes. I'm going to do a quick jump through Amazon, Home Depot, and Kroger. So Amazon now allows suppliers to redispute shortage claims. Really great. So if your initial dispute claim was denied or was only partially approved, go ahead and redispute it an additional time, especially those big ticket charges. Go back in Vendor Central and dispute those. Even if they are, if they're still on your docket, go back through and dispute those. So that'd be my recommendation, especially before their timeline to dispute is over. And then the initial dispute must be completed before you submit a redispute claim. That makes sense. And up to 10 shortage claims can be included in one redispute. So you can essentially manually bulk dispute with Vendor Central. But if you have more than 10, you're going to have to create multiple redispute claims. So that's exciting. Maybe a potential to win back more money before the year is over. With Home Depot, the transportation compliance program moved from quarterly disputing cadence to a monthly disputing cadence. So make sure you're keeping up to date with that. I know some suppliers weren't aware of this change and they were keeping it on a quarterly dispute, and then they have a huge backlog and maybe they've missed some of the dates for disputing when it moved to a monthly cadence. So make sure that your team is aware of that and is disputing in the correct cadence. Trade discounts are no longer disputable. That happened this year. We wrote a Vendorville article on that. You can go read it. So that functionality is not available. What we've told suppliers to focus on is the disputes they can go after and actually win back, and make sure that you're learning how you can prevent any trade discount issues in the future to not lose any of that money that you can actually dispute. And then the dispute window policy changed from 12 months based on the chargeback date to 12 months based on the invoice date only. So again, make sure you understand those windows, how much time you have to dispute claims, and make sure you're going after those in a timely manner so you're not losing money on the table from a issue like you didn't dispute in the window. And that window is pretty large, 12 months. So you have plenty of time to go after Home Depot deductions. And then lastly, not a lot of changes, especially on the deduction front with Kroger, but the Kroger and Albertsons merger may have an impact on how you're disputing or how you're working with those suppliers, because Kroger did move to buy Albertsons, so it would essentially make it the largest grocery chain in the US. The FTC is suing to stop the merger, but there hasn't been many updates on that. I believe when I was looking into it this morning, they've slated a judge for this case. Otherwise, there's not anything that has come through in terms of a ruling. So we'll be keeping our eye on that, because that may impact how suppliers are working with these particular retailers in the future. All right, I made it to the Q&A right on time. I know I made Peter work in the chat, and I'm ready to answer questions or even just kind of talk about what we got into today.
Yeah, I was really spamming them for a little bit there. There's a lot all in a row. But yeah, we don't have any questions in yet, so definitely get those in now if you have any of them, or if there's some kind of lingering thoughts that you want to put in the chat, we'd be happy to see that as well. I think that we have our emails up here too that we can show, just in case you think that you might have a question later, but you don't have one right now. You can go ahead and write those down now. Of course, I mean, we're on every webinar, so you can download basically any slide deck and you can see our emails there too. So if you have any questions about what these updates might mean in terms of revenue loss or whatever, you can definitely send those questions our way. But
Peter, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And I can answer as well. When you and I have worked on this content, read and researched about this, what do you think is one of the things suppliers should take away from 2024 when moving into 2025? Maybe their supplier resolution, we could call it.
New Year's resolution. Well, I'm not so sure about like what action suppliers need to necessarily resolve to kind of take. I think that the emphasis for 2024 at Walmart was more on, helping suppliers become more compliant with their programs and making those more reasonable. I know that Target, their updates were very much kind of along those lines as well. How can we help suppliers to keep in stocks so that their business performance will be better, our business performance will be better from the retailer's perspective. For the next year, I think, this is probably just my bias from having, been in the Luminate world for so long, Scintilla, Luminate, DSS world for so long. But it seems like in terms of for Walmart, having a higher level of visibility, right? The kind of thing that companies like SupplyPike have been trying to do for a long time with their dashboards and, helping people do understand their priorities. It seems like now the retailers are really kind of getting involved with that in a pretty sophisticated way. Luminate is really growing a lot. We have these webinars that we're putting out all the time now because there's new product updates that are happening every month. Walmart is rolling out new things. So I guess maybe that's just from a Walmart perspective. It's like, how can we track performance that's omni-channel and that's got, everything covered as accurately as possible. But again, what does that mean for suppliers? I don't really know.
Yeah, though I like what you're saying about, the retailers, because whatever you do, as a supplier should be in response to the retailer. It's a partnership. So you want to, be doing something great for your partnership, but also be taking care of your interests in that partnership. I would say, just to build on what you've said, Peter, I think it kind of goes back to the thing we talk about a lot. If you haven't gotten your compliance or deductions in order, this is the time to start making a game plan to clean up house in terms of, how do I start disputing these deductions? How do I start winning these back? How do I have a clear visibility of what's coming and almost get this either, offboarded from something I'm working on daily, or build a different strategy because what I'm doing now isn't working, so that you can focus on that partnership. So you can respond to, okay, there's a change. I'm going to be the first supplier learning this platform. I'm going to be the first supplier making recommendations to my buyer using these tools that Walmart's rolling out or Target's rolling out. I think that's the way to win the game at this point in 2025, is making sure the things that are basic, you've got either automated. I know someone said in this chat using AI, and I know that's been the buzzword this year. Is there a way I can use AI to make this better? Is there a way I can automate? Thinking through those things so I can focus on some of those things that need human touch, that need some of that more strategy and detail-oriented work on it. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about revenue loss recovery teams. I think that is really, that would be a good way of kind of creating a resolution for your team, is like, how can we make this as quick and easy as possible, getting that money back? But yeah, I think that's it for us today. We don't have any questions in, so we'll see you next time.